Today I'm chatting with CEO and co-founder of Bitfur Surround, Stefan Schulz. How are you today, Stefan?
I'm very good. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on the show. Excited to chat with you today. And how have you been holding up amidst the current crisis?
Actually, better than I thought. Even though I have to admit that it's been quite crazy to be so confined,
Yeah.
especially family, kids, dogs, everybody in one house. So that's been like kind of challenging. But I think we've actually made it pretty well through the crisis so far.
That's good to hear. I've got a serious case of quarantine hair myself. It's been growing quite long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's good, and it's also great not to travel so much by plane. So now we have Zoom and all these video conferences and stuff like that, a lot of telecommunications. So I thought we're gaining a little bit of efficiency here. And then at the same time, also you realize that you have very little time because everything is so packed and completely to the contrary, to what you would think being at home.
certainly, it's a good thing that we have all this infrastructure at the same time. Yeah, definitely travel's been off the table, and I recently became a digital nomad, and then this pandemic came along, and I haven't been able to travel. But I guess all in good time, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of the unique challenges streaming poses when it comes to the collection of recording and publishing royalties?
I think it's not so much, the challenges basically are how would you be able to unfold the true value of an intellectual property asset or a song in this case, or a movie or a video, whatever, but basically a video or a song across the board. If you really look into all the digital exploitation scenarios, and streaming, of course, is the biggest one of those. And so I would say one of the challenges is, of course, the efficient administration of the flow of the value. Another thing is, of course, the whole way the administration is set up is of course a very I would say antique structure, and it's also not very efficient. And then at the same time, to install a consistent data set with regards to the ownership, the origin, all the kind of protection matters of the asset, but at the same time, to make it fit into the let's say kind of commercial, like real commercial data play that is out there, that is of course very different from a traditional licensing scheme. And in our industry, we are not really capable of meeting the standards that you normally would that have been kind of established by Silicon Valley and like all the big platforms with regard to this. So that's a big challenge, because we have to kind of come to a level playing field between the intellectual property industry and the data industry, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, I guess one of the main things artists would probably notice just in their day-to-day life is staring at their dashboard, looking at their accounting and seeing those numbers coming through like months later or weeks later, depending on how fast the whole system is. And as we know, it's not fast. It's actually quite slow.
Yeah. There are several things in here that are linked to the value itself, and one of them is of course the speed. The other one is actually the administrative architecture, which is, if you look at for example, you look at some sort of a vessel or something like that, and you're trying to pour some water. It really depends on how narrow, how wide is the outlet there. Like the numbers that you see even if they make sense, which is already a big challenge. The other question is, to what extent are they the real numbers representing the value that you should be able to realize in the big ocean of data out there? And that is definitely something, what I can say, for at least from an artist perspective, or from an intellectual like copyright owner perspective, could also be a label or publisher or anybody. It's you have absolutely no visibility on what these numbers mean in the overall value generation of your content.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, if people properly understood what their data is, they could make more decisive commitments to whatever it is that's going to boost their rankings or their revenue or whatever their goals might be. Without that knowledge, yeah, it's a lot harder. I know that in my case, I've had one track pulled from Spotify because they claim there was a bot that was listening to it. To the best of my knowledge, no bot. And I also had a single that apparently did very well in Europe, but I never saw any royalties or any money from that. So it's like, in a world of shadow banning and random acts of, who knows, sabotage, it's a challenging landscape.
Very, very challenging, and it's impossible. The main problem that we are facing is, and that's not only because of safe harbor and all these things, but the main thing is that you have a consolidation of power, and like kind of a asymmetry that is given by the system, that is always tending to go and flow into the direction of somebody that accumulates the most of its kind. So, for example, if it's data, then of course the platform economy would capture the most, accumulate the highest amount of value, and then of course they would also accumulate the most, like power, and they have it in their hands. Now, as an individual, if you just have one song, for example, so you're a creator and you just have one piece, what can you do? If I cannot even change the privacy rules of Facebook as a user without government and people making a lot of noise, what can I do as an individual artist in such an ocean? And
Yes.
that is that's a huge one, a huge challenge.
Absolutely, and I think it's good to build awareness for it, even if we don't have the decisive solution. I think you're working on one of the solutions that's going to make a difference. But government control and bureaucracy is probably always going to be there. So it's really going to be a thing of how do we navigate it. On YouTube and so forth,
Yeah.
people are talking about demonetization and channels being deleted and COPPA and all this other stuff. So yeah, that just adds to the complexity and challenge overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that from our perspective, from my perspective in this case, when I'm talking about this, is that this, what is it called, mismatching value create, let's say, capturing of value and or distribution of value, is basically very obvious if you look at the let's say financial, you look at the financial data, you look at the, let's say, 10 biggest platforms in the world and how they actually, have reach a market cap of 2,000 billion or even higher. And they managed to, let's take away COVID for a moment, but they certainly managed to grow compound annual growth rate kind of thing, by like 30-40% on that level. I mean, this is just absolutely crazy if you really compare it to like a music industry with somewhere like in the 20 million billions, and then you grow by, let's say, 8%, right? So like it's such an under proportional growth that there is something wrong for sure in that system.
Wow.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Well,
then yeah, sorry.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, and then the other thing is, if you are, let's say, participating in an under proportional way, or in a like not comparable way, or let's say you are participating in a way that is inferior to the other side, then this is also a clear, this is also a very very. Sorry, I lost my point right now because I'm actually thinking about this, participation, in a sense that if there's more content out there and there's more people producing content every day and
Yes.
there's more creativity across the globe,
Yes.
that means automatically you dilute like crazy. And if you already dilute in an unfair, I'm not saying fair because fair is not really right, but it's if you dilute very much amongst your peers in a system or in a marketplace that is not, let's say, leveled, yeah, then you of course have a huge disadvantage. And in fact, that means that the more content is being created across the globe, more people, more content, more output, the system is eating it up, and it will, ultimately lead to the fact that, like on a content by content basis, you will lose a lot of lifetime value, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, I think part of what you're saying there is Earth's population is quickly rising to 8 billion people. There's 24,000 songs released every day, 1 million tracks
Yeah,
every 6 weeks. There's more
yes,
content, meaning there should be more engagement because everyone has family, everyone has friends,
yes,
and friends and family are usually the first supporters of the people that they love and the music they make. So you're absolutely right. I think you make a good point that overall engagement should only be on the up and up, but the
yeah,
system is not reflecting that.
not at all.
Yeah.
And this is why we are like talking about something that is, if you will, like an artistic, kind of dilution and inferior, that's what I was looking for.
Hmm.
That is given, that is system given. And if you combine this with the lack of authority, because you give your rights everywhere, but you have absolutely no way of controlling what you're doing, then this is, I think it's a very very dangerous cocktail.
Yes.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, we are not. If you really look a little bit, from the outside into this market, I think you don't really get excited about it because in terms of like numbers, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm an investor or if I'm a big, like group, I've been working now with entertainment, with big, corporations, and we've been monetizing our content as I when I was this chief digital officer at Universal Music. Then basically, it's, they were always, these big corporations, they were looking at entertainment more as a, some kind of a toy, so it's funny, it's great, you have some user engagement, it's amazing how many data points you can generate. But if you really look at it, the industry has not grown actually since 2002, right? So the numbers,
Huh.
they are now reaching 2002. So, I mean, there's not so much to celebrate. It's nice, it's great. There's more significance towards what with regards to the content, but the value growth is so under proportional that, from my perspective, we should be more concerned than celebrating.
Good point. I think this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and yet, myself, people in my mastermind group, other music educators that I've had on the podcast, all seem to agree this is still the hardest industry to make it in.
It's the easiest industry probably to generate, data points.
Yes.
And if data is you cannot, I mean, it's almost ridiculous if you talk about data and oil now because oil is at zero, but you know what I mean? It's like, if it is really, if it is really valuable and it's creating a lot of value and the data points are the new value, then you should ask yourself, I generate, let's say as a Billie Eilish, 1 billion data points in, I don't know, like 48 hours. And at the same time, the significance of what we are doing, and I would say the average income of all the individual artists out there is in decline, and
Yeah.
that is something that is really weird.
Right. A lot of people would maybe just look at that and go, okay, that's because there's more competition than ever before. But like we were saying earlier, there's more engagement than ever before. So the fact that artists' income is declining doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, if you really look at it from an administrative perspective,
Yeah.
and you look at it from like kind of visibility, that you understand what's going on with your stuff, and protection and authority, and so you will be able to connect to all these different usage scenarios in a much better way, make it more transparent, and of course, this would automatically create a value shift, a lift, so it would bring up the overall value. But if you cut 2 or 3 different administrative steps, then of course you times your productivity, right? That's one big thing. So in other words, what I'm saying is, even if you have more content coming into the pool, I would still assume that there is a huge potential by like, if we get the metadata business under control, if we get the streamline the processes, and if we work like at arm's length with the big platforms, which really are not creating 150 data pools. If you look at ask Apple or Google to work with such kind of an ancient system where we have, like, I don't know, 260 collecting societies and everybody. It's not that there are too many. I'm just saying that there's too much information out there that's not consistent. So it causes a lot of friction, and it really also causes a huge loss of productivity. So this is one big thing. The other thing is that I think, if you are able today to monetize individual data points, so like, for example, you're talking about the family, you can also refer to the families now that are tuning into Disney and all this class, Disney Plus and all these things. So, and many people do many things now in terms of like how they handle content. The information behind that is valuable, of course. Now, if I put this information into a marketplace scenario that is, for example, like an auction-based advertising system in the case of Google, right? That would mean that they can individualize each data monetization scenario they want in real time. And the craziest thing is, they can actually do an auction and have people increase the price by themselves. So now, on the other hand, if I look at the connecting point and say it's a content piece, okay, this piece is not even able to individually determine its price point in YouTube. So you understand what I mean? It's like completely crazy. If you suggest today to, let's say, I'm just making it up. You suggest today to a brand, I don't know, like Vans or whatever, Rolex or whatever you like, right? Take any brand, right? And you suggest, okay, I give my product to a retail store, but I have absolutely no control to what price they sell. I have absolutely no control how they operate, how they place it in the windows. Whatever they do, I have absolutely no control. That means I would destroy my brand, because I don't even understand how the value is being how the value is being, first of all, generated, and then afterwards even attributed to me. A company like Porsche, Rolex, or these guys, they would never allow this to happen. In fact, they even control the secondary markets, right? But artists just say, "Oh, put my stuff on Spotify, great," and that's it. End of discussion.
Yeah. It's basically been that way since the days of iTunes, right? When pretty much all prices were suddenly standardized.
Yes. And in our case, I used to work with Vivendi, because I was at Vivendi, when I was in the movie industry, for TV industry, for a couple of years, because we were creating a pan-European kind of Netflix platform, and I was working with Breaking Bad and all these guys. I noticed that the movie industry is completely different, right? Just imagine, if you see that the system itself is generating too much value, and you are Disney, you say, bye Netflix, that's it. Because it doesn't pay for me. I
Yeah.
take my entire content out of this and I create a new environment which I believe is better for me, right? And this is the kind of discussion that in the music industry is for the moment by nature of the way that the infrastructure is working, not working. So for example, if I said, I give you an example, Marilyn Manson, Halloween receives not zero point 0.4 cents per stream, but 2 cents. Okay, just for 48 hours around Halloween time. For the moment, the infrastructure does not allow for that. Where Google can individualize each data point even by second. Because they, okay, well, only between 8 and 9 at night, this, this thing is happening and I'll get 4 times the money and stuff like that. Those are those capabilities that are very, very normal in the world of Silicon Valley, are not normal to our industry, and that's a huge, huge loss of value here.
That is absolutely fascinating. I think we've painted a good picture of what the problem is. And now we want to begin talking a little bit about the solution as well. I mean, I could go down that track forever, but I figure, we'll have you on the show anyway, and you're proposing solutions. So we should talk about that as well. So, it's not hard for me to see how blockchain technology could represent a solution when it comes to the collection of royalties. It'd be instantaneous, irreversible, transparent. But I would love to hear your thoughts on what you see as being possible that was previously limited by lesser technology.
I think that from a, let's say, from a perspective of a marketeer, it's a very that's a very important thing to look at it from a marketing let's say from a marketing and business perspective, because the scientific perspective has been very much limited to the metadata problem, right?
Yes.
And certain solutions that are more, I would say, mechanic, and they're in the background and they are not really very sexy in terms of how you adopt them and how you work and interoperate with them. So from a marketing perspective, from a sales perspective, from a business perspective, and also from, let's say, more like like an overall financial asset management perspective, because actually content that we are talking about, intellectual property, copyrights, they are true assets, like a house, like anything else. They're very well protected, but not very well. The protection is not very well executed, right? So that means that so the theoretic protection is strong, but the real the protection against value loss has always been very, very bad. It has a lot to do with broadcasting rights and other things. I don't want to go in there, but mainly this is from a marketeer perspective, we need to have a commercial solution. Okay, so the solution that gives you money and that provides you value. So in my opinion, we have to really look deep into the let's say infrastructure play that allows a new commercial let's say operation for the market. And this operation, this kind of let's say infrastructure, the last one that was really successfully introduced was centralized, which is as you remember, Apple and iTunes.
Yeah.
Because it was very very well constructed, and it was just so necessary to do something. The market was really in turmoil. There was nothing happening there. There was a lot of piracy, and I was in the middle of that at that time. And then you had Sony really being completely lost in their flat screen play, and they didn't do the right things except for the PlayStation. So they really lost everything with the Walkman. So that was the perfect environment, and the computers sucked in terms of like how they looked like and stuff like that. So this whole infrastructure play there was amazing, right? Nokia was not really very well prepared, and all this kind of stuff. So that means that infrastructure introduction, end to end, closed, walled garden, but at the same time open to all developers. That was the killer, right? So it carried us for like 10 years. And now I think the next thing that needs to happen is we need to introduce an infrastructure that is the next generation infrastructure for the market. And this infrastructure is very likely to be open, and it will be very likely decentralized. And it has to offer, let's say, a playing field with regards to all the different industries attached, regardless of the power that they carry and bring to the market. So asymmetries, in a sense, that are God given today, just by the nature of how big organizations are and platforms are and the data play is, these have to be equaled out and leveled out. So this is the perspective that I look at it. From my perspective, this is something that calls for a kind of a very mild blockchain scenario in the background that allows you to connect the dots in the sense that these dots will be commercially active in the long run. It's going to take 6, 8, 10 years, right? It's not going to be overnight. It will never
Yeah.
happen. It's too complex. But I would envisage us to have an internet of content potentially in the next 6 to 8 years that is going to allow creators to make so much more money and to have such a better perspective, commercial perspective, that the market is not growing by 6, 8%, but really exponentially growing. And that's what brings us to the same level as, for example, Google and these guys, because everything then 10x, as you remember, they don't even care about. I mean, they don't touch it if it's not 50% EBITDA. They want to always grow, exponentially, because that's what the shareholders expect. And this kind of scenario, this is only possible if we come to an infrastructure that allows this to happen. Now, one of the major impediments and blocking points here is that we are talking not about a data point or about, let's say, a piece of code, but we're talking about a very complex, let's say, work, piece of art. In the sense, I remember I used to work, very complex with so many complicated artist scenarios and shareholder asset management scenarios in terms of artists. Like most of the people know the Who, where Pete Townsend is really, not very much friendly with the other guys in the band at that time, at least. That this is such a very, very complex collaborative environment that I think in order to come to a collaborative commerce play that allows for quick exponential growth, you need to have a neutrality in terms of how to collaborate. And with blockchain, you don't have to ask for this because it's given in the code. So nobody will be, let's say, inferior or minor, as superior towards each other in one band or in one creation scenario, right? Because it's the rules are transparent, and the way that they interoperate, they will always be able to rely on each other, even if they hate each other, which is a very interesting thing from an artist perspective, because we have so many scenarios that are really calling for this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So either not because you don't like each other, but also because it's very complex with contracts and different people working with each other, and they don't really trust each other. So this is kind of, I think, the perfect environment to go to have it as a strong, very strong blockchain backbone that can also scale. That's another problem, by the way.
Yeah, I do recognize too. I read Blockchain Revolution, and it identified quite a few challenges connected to blockchain and deploying it at a much larger, scalable level. But it's great to hear you explain how long you expect that to take, and even talk about some of the challenges. So you really answered some of my next questions, which is great. one of the advantages of the blockchain is that it could present new opportunities for monetization, and the possibilities are kind of beyond overwhelming. But what kinds of revenue streams do you see as being viable?
Yeah, so I would say that it's very hard to answer this question. If I was like on day one now, just compare it to the App Store for a second.
Mm.
I remember I brought my first iPhone 1 to some of my artists at that time, and they loved it when we came from the US. And I just gave them as a gift, and they are still talking about it. It was very much, very exciting. And if you remember, we had like 10 apps on it. I think no more. So how many apps do we have today?
Tons,
Millions,
tons,
tens
tons.
of millions, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first of all, you would have made many mistakes by predicting what's going to happen. So, one of the big things that I can tell you about is that you would have made a big mistake in terms of how the gaming world plays out, because everybody was on console, and you would, yeah, Call of Duty, perfect, let's go. Now, for 15 years it was not even happening. Now you have the first real acceptable version of Call of Duty on an iPhone or on an iPad. So in other words, Candy Crush and all these guys was much more feasible, right? So you would be like, you take like very, low key fun games, very, not like 2 billion in development, right? And there were also complete different people playing with this. So like female demographics, where everybody was super surprised. So things all of a sudden went in a completely crazy direction, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that developers could do things all of a sudden. Now, we have to be a little bit careful with our predictions, because now we would say, oh right, let's take all the Spotify's and all these guys, and then they now they will have to timestamp, and they have to go on the blockchain, da 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 da. You get more visibility, you extract more value. Could be, yes, great. You potentially have other services that would compete, because then all of a sudden you have a level playing field, so everybody could be like kind of become a Spotify, right?
Yes.
And then this is I think one scenario that is potentially very likely, but it will take time, and it's also very, very interesting it will be very interesting to see how this plays out. But not only a few people think that in the end potentially every artist will become a DSP.
Mm.
So that's going to be a crazy world out there, where everything is connected with everybody's connected with everybody, and everybody will be remunerated, and it's all connected through blockchain, because then the money flow will be like crazy. Like 10 people will participate in different countries, and so that's one thing. So you will be encouraged to become a DSP. You will be encouraged to work with repertoire. So this is I think, on the streaming side, I think this is going to potentially increase the number of DSPs by an almost unlimited factor. And
Wow.
then you have all the different scenarios how to interact and interoperate with content, which is today still very tricky. I was the head of, I was basically managing the licensing department in Central Eastern Europe for Universal, and then you start doing this. It's sometimes still quite manual. Then you cannot reach the artist. Clearances are deferred and delayed, and then Morrissey doesn't have a fax machine. I'm really talking old school talk now, right? And
Mm.
then you cannot read them. And then on the other hand, you have people who want to interoperate. They cannot interoperate. The rules are not clear. Contracts cannot be made. Blah, 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 blah. Super difficult to interoperate with this industry, right?
Yeah.
Now, you take it out of the context, put it into something that is easy and scalable, and you can just connect because it's pre-cleared. And then you go. I would assume there is thousands of developers and people that would love to work with content if it was that easy. I don't get sued. Contracts are automatic. I can
Yeah.
test a little bit. I don't have to be like, humiliated by some marketing people that tell me I want a minimum guarantee of 200 million. I'm a startup. I only have 80,000. You know what I mean? Even for my own employees. So the whole and then the delays and stuff like that. So I think there will be a big number of use cases that we cannot even imagine if we facilitate the interoperability, and that's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds absolutely explosive. And that's an interesting conversation as well. I want to shift into the next part now, and that's a little bit more about you personally and the various ventures that you've had. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you've overcome in your various ventures?
You want to have my? I mean, the answer to this is of course not that easy, but I can tell you. First of all, the alignment of capital, to connect, or let's say to come to a point where the capital understands what you want to do and supports and scales with you, on that around that specific venture. And the reason for that is that sometimes capital is not very patient. Sometimes there is a lot of political capital out there. So, and then there is also a little bit of, I would say, frustration if it comes to working with creative people, right?
Yeah.
So this is I think this is one of the things. It's still very alien to put money together with content and with technology. A lot of frustrations also. I was a little bit, lucky and also an entrepreneur enough to overcome this. Is of course the whole legal side, right?
Yes.
Because in order to move, you have to shoot. It's like in the Wild West. I mean, we've all observed Mark Zuckerberg and all these guys, right? I mean, if the default question if the default status would have been to ask and to get lawyers and everybody on board, Facebook would be nothing today, right?
It would not
So that
exist.
means,
Yeah.
yeah, it would probably not exist because you have to move. Now, moving in our environment is like moving in quicksand. So that's another thing, big challenge. And with regards to how does the programming and how does the production and your product itself accelerate and test and let's say how do you do go for the iterate and all this kind of stuff compared to the gaming industry, for example, or compared to Disney, where you own all the characters. Much easy, right? In our business, it's more tricky because you cannot automatically do what you want. So you always have to be a little bit prepared to get in conflict with certain copyright organizations in each country and all this kind of stuff, and streamline. Let's put together the content in a way that you can act quickly. So that's also been a challenge. And if you want to do that and adopt that in your product, then of course the product is suffering a little bit because you cannot develop the product in the speed that you would like sometimes, right?
Of course.
So this is the thing. The other thing is that it's a very complex world if it comes to music, because there is in order to provide a compelling, let's say, offer to the audience, then you normally have to be able to have a full catalog in order to play with the audience, or at least you have to be understanding how can you work with the content you have in order to create a compelling offer, right?
Yeah.
So this I think in a gamified way with TikTok, for example, is a little bit easier. It's great than it is for let's say a competitor of Spotify, right? But so those are, I think the the main challenges, and then of course what has always been difficult is to let's say overcome this kind of market share politics label scenario. That was in the past a big problem. Now it's not so much because everybody understands they have to go all in order to grow the market. So those are like just some examples.
Those are some fantastic examples. And then on the flip side of that, what are some of the greatest victories you've experienced?
To be honest, I have and I have to really think about it again. To be really, really, honestly, I think the biggest victories in my life now in 20 years in digital business, they have been with the most simplistic products. Yeah, and in a sense that even my friends, my artists, some of the artists call me and say, "What is this bullshit? What the hell is a ring?" You know.
Yeah.
So we were selling ringtones. I remember. I think I have several awards here for like 100 million and 50 million, 200 million ringtones. I think we sold like, I don't know. I remember Mario Winans and Eminem just in Germany. I think in 1 week we sold something like 500,000 ringtones for $3. Can you imagine? In one country.
Wow.
So it's of course a very simple product. People liked it. It worked. Boom. Okay. So this kind of stuff, sometimes you may not think it's a very, very fancy and elaborate thing, but it makes a lot of money. And this is the kind of experience that I've made. The easier it gets, whatever we were doing this Netflix thing, you put TV shows on it, boom, very easy to retrieve. You just stream, that's it, right? So these kind of things where the flow is easy for the consumer, it's entertaining. You can potentially even show off with it, like with the ringtones and stuff. Great. I just recently learned also that in the gaming industry, it's also pretty much the same. That the number of casual games has been so much. I mean, there was so much exploding that it basically killed more or less big of the big franchises that used to exist before. So I think that is it. It's simplicity wins, and you have to be fast. And then those were the big things.
Absolutely. I think, the tried and true and tested and the proven paths to monetization and success are far more reliable than trying to be a Mark Zuckerberg or some kind of innovator. And that goes for music too, for sure.
Yeah. So look at AR, VR. It's difficult, you see?
Absolutely it is.
But to charge an SMS through a mobile network, boom, one click, it basta. You don't even have to sign a contract.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So thank you so much for today's conversation. I am going to have to wrap it up because I got to jump on my next call. Maybe we'll have to catch up again in the future. But Thank you for your time and generosity, Stefan. Is there anything else I should have asked?
I had one thing, but I think, I forgot it now because it's kind of late here.
Yes.
I think we covered a lot. So that's absolutely great. I really appreciate that we could have talked, that we spoke.
3 career-killing mistakes all musicians make. Do you know what they are? I want you to have this. It's at musicentrepreneur.hq.com/free-report. That's free-report. And as you might have guessed, you can get it entirely for free. And if you'd like to support the ongoing creation of great podcast content like this, you can go to patreon.com/newmusicindustry and consider becoming a patron. I'm David Angeweeb, and I look forward to seeing you on the stages of the world. Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.